I wanted to take a minute to quickly talk about two relatively new television shows that have premiered, one on ABC and one on Fox. The first is Once Upon a Time, and the second is Terra Nova. These two shows are kind of interesting because they have a few things in common. They're both ridiculously expensive shows to produce, and they're both trying to get essentially the same audience, which is kind of the we audience. They're trying to get the family watching both of these shows. I'm going to keep an eye on both of these because what's happening to the two of them is really kind of interesting and really unexpected to me. So let's start with the first one, Once Upon a Time. Essentially, the premise for this show is that there are a bunch of fairy tale characters that we all know and love, like Snow White and Prince Charming and Pinocchio, and I'm sure they'll introduce more as the show goes on. And basically what happens is that in the fantasy world, the Wicked Queen uses a curse to take everybody to our world and give them essentially normal lives and normal problems, where instead of dragons, it's you have to pay your rent. The other show, Terra Nova, is really strange. I've never seen this quite done before, but it's a futuristic show set 65 million years in the past, or however many million years in the past it's set. And how the hell did they do that? Well, they come up with this premise where in the future they found this vortex to the past, and the future world is really screwed up with pollution and overpopulation and all this. You know, people, you can only have so many kids, it's gotten that bad. So they're sending people back to the past to try and have kind of a fresh start, and you're probably thinking what I'm thinking, well, if they're in the past, won't they screw up the future? Apparently not, because they're essentially sending them back to an alternate timeline, so the future, they can have their cake and eat it too. The future exists, and the past world, with its new future, can also exist. Now, if I had to put money on it, I would have bet that the Terra Nova show was going to take off, and the Once Upon a Time show wasn't going to go anywhere. And it's actually turning out to be completely the opposite case. Terra Nova is doing okay in the ratings, which is really not good for the show, and I'll go into that in a minute. And Once Upon a Time is really taking off as a hit show. So let me start with Once Upon a Time and my thoughts on that show, and then I'll go over to Terra Nova. Because both of the shows, where they're going and what happened to them, is really interesting to me. I said this as soon as I learned what the premise for this show was, and as soon as I saw the pilot, and I've been saying it ever since I've been watching. This is a terrible idea for a show. I mean, just terrible. It might be an okay idea for a movie, and I think this actually was an idea for a movie, putting a fairy tale character into the real world. I think that was the premise for Enchanted, which I think I saw once, and I think I liked it. And I'm surprised by how much I don't like this show, because you would think that this would be right up my alley. I love fairy tales, and I kind of like fairy tales being spliced together with the real world. My problem with this show is the premise and the characters. First of all, if you're going to do a show where you're taking fairy tale characters and dropping them in the real world, you should make some kind of a distinction between the characters in the fairy tale world and the characters in reality, and I really haven't seen that. There is no appreciable difference, for me anyway, between the way they act in the fairy tale world and the way they act in the real world. You're just replacing fairy tale problems and fairy tale lives with real world problems and real world lives. I also don't understand how this is supposed to be a curse exactly, because we're told, oh yeah, we're going to send these people to someplace horrible, and they're not going to remember who they are, and they're going to be stuck in our world, and I was under the impression when all of this was being said that they were going to have crappy lives in our world, but some of them have average lives, some of them have normal lives, some of them have a little bit below average lives, and then some of them are super rich. And so, not only are their lives not really that bad, but they can't even remember who they are. So there's no real victory for the Wicked Queen if they don't even remember who they're supposed to be, then how is this something bad for them? They don't even know any better. And you just have this problem of having a fairy tale world that doesn't feel like a fairy tale world, and having a real world that doesn't feel like a real world. But the show's biggest problem for me so far in its run, they've had a couple of okay episodes. My problem really is the characters. I mean, I cannot get past the fact that none of them are particularly different, whether you're dealing with either world. I mean, Snow White is Snow White here and there. Prince Charming is a pretty generic character no matter where he is. The only character that's pulling me through that show is the Rumpelstiltskin character. I would actually freely tune in every week just to see what he's going to do, because that is the only actor on the show who is playing any kind of a character with any real sense of fun and excitement, and actually making the characters different in both worlds. I mean, the Rumpelstiltskin character in the fairy tale world is the exact opposite of the his name is Mr. Gold in the real world. They're both polar opposites. One of them is very almost cabaret, kabuki kind of a character, and the other one is really soft-spoken and just mild-mannered, and you never quite know what's going on with him, so he's good. Everything else, the show kind of baffles me, and this is just me personally, but I also really don't like that kid. I think they're trying too hard to make him plucky, and it's just coming off as obnoxious. But, those viewpoints are completely different, obviously, than the people who are tuning in. And the show is having no problem with ratings so far. It's a ratings juggernaut. The pilot, they roped in 11 million viewers, and they have kept them. I mean, that is pretty damn good. It more than justifies the expense of this show, and I'm sure the people at ABC are really happy, and they're going to keep the show around for a while. My problem with the show as it is conceived is that there is absolutely no possibility for longevity in this series. I mean, eventually we know that these people are going to figure it out. They're going to figure out it's a curse. They're going to know what's going on. Unless they're going to continue to dangle that carrot over our heads for seasons on end, this is all going to be wrapped up in one season. And then what are they going to do? And I don't know that the people who are making this show have really thought about that yet. I think this is a case of they're saying, okay, we have this one idea, this great idea for a show that can sustain one season. What are we going to do after that if the show becomes a hit? Let us just get this one great season out now, and then we'll deal with that later. And that is a recipe for disaster. That will kill your show. If you know what you're doing for one season, and then you're just going to come back later and try and figure something out, down the road, that's a recipe for disaster. We saw this happen to Heroes. We saw it happen big time to Prison Break. And I really think that they're putting themselves in a bad situation where if I'm wrong and the show is great, it's going to be great for one season, and then it's all going to go downhill, and it's just going to present itself as a series that doesn't know what it wants to be or where it wants to go. But for now anyway, the ratings are phenomenal. Terra Nova is a different story. This was supposed to be a big breakout hit. This show was tailored and designed to be a breakout hit. They sunk so much money, ridiculous amounts of money into this show. I think that I had read somewhere that the pilot cost upwards of $10 million just to do the pilot, and they're spending a total of about $4 million an episode. That is silly money, and they were absolutely banking on this show being a hit. It premiered to a sizable audience, and they've lost a lot of that audience. The last time I checked, I believe that they had dipped under the 6 million viewer mark, which isn't horrible. It's kind of on par with the ratings of House, which has kind of dipped in the ratings as the show has kind of begun to, be on its last legs, and they're running out of ideas, and the viewership is showing. that's okay for House because they've already had a good track record with the show, and it's not that expensive. It's not $4 million an episode, for God's sake. So yeah, the ratings aren't doing so good. And it's interesting to me because I thought that Terra Nova had the worst pilot that I've ever seen in my life. I absolutely understand why they lost the viewers that they did, because the pilot wasn't very good at all. They didn't establish a single character. They just kind of plunked them in there. It was all almost 100% exposition about things we can look at, which is not uncommon for a pilot, and I understand it is a pilot, and they're just showing you, here's what the show can be, but they could have done something special with it, and instead it was just getting the ball rolling. And I didn't like the pilot at all. After watching a few of the episodes, it actually kind of saddens me that this show is in trouble, because I think it's getting better. At least for what it is. I don't think that Terra Nova is a good show, but I think it is good entertainment. And I think there's a gap in the market right now for a show like that people can just tune into and enjoy. Something like they have over at the Sci-Fi Channel with Warehouse 13 and Eureka, which unfortunately got canceled. They're not great shows, but they are what they are, and they do their job well. And I think that this show is starting to do its job very well. And unfortunately, I don't think that it's going to last. I think that they might try one or two things, like maybe they'll cut the budget. They could cut it in half and it would still be too expensive, though. So maybe they'll cut it a lot. Maybe they'll try and air it on another day. They might get guest stars. But this is Fox, and they're probably going to say, we have House, we have Bones, we have Family Guy, we have all these shows. Why are we going to continue to try and keep this show afloat? Why not just axe it? And I think that's probably what they're going to do, but we'll see. But this is kind of interesting because you have two shows that are bidding for the same family kind of audience, and two shows that are very, very expensive. And one of them latched on to the American public and the other one did not. And so what did one do right and what did the other do wrong? Well, there's really no saying because both shows are so different, but I think probably what Once Upon a Time is doing right is that they're going for charm. And I have to admit that, the show can be a bit charming, no pun intended, and something that is going to appeal to kids because it is a fantasy, whereas Terra Nova is kind of sci-fi, and it's kind of Terra Nova is all business, whereas Once Upon a Time can kind of stretch its legs and have fun a little bit more. Terra Nova has kind of been doing that in the last couple of episodes, but it's leaning really, really hard on this mystery adventure plot, which is actually kind of making me a little more interested every time I watch it, but I don't really think that that's necessarily going to appeal to the families. I think Once Upon a Time is in a much better position to do that, and obviously that's true because they have the ratings and Terra Nova doesn't. Also over on the Once Upon a Time camp, you have a lot of people that were involved in Lost, and I remember the show being advertised as from the creators of Lost or from the writers of Lost or some such thing, and that kind of made me interested. As usual, Steven Spielberg is just slapping his name on anything science fiction, and this time it just happens to be Terra Nova, and I don't think people really put too much stock into that name anymore, since he's kind of hoard his name to... I mean, you've got his name on, Terra Nova, but you've also got it on Falling Skies and, anything from, Tiny Toons to really, A-list movies. So I think people probably don't put too much stock into that anymore. You also have a lot of old Star Trek people doing Terra Nova, including our old friend Brandon Braga, which is probably why the pilot wasn't so good. So I don't know that name recognition is really playing too much of a role in either of these shows. I think that Once Upon a Time just got that family audience, and Terra Nova is really having a hard time doing that. And I think Fox is not wrong in saying that we're not really seeing the numbers here to justify such an expensive show. And ABC is saying, we've got the ratings, you guys can have more money for all we care because everyone in the world is watching this. I don't really know where the money is going in either of these shows because to me they don't look that great, especially on Terra Nova. When they do something small, like they had a scene where I think a bunch of beetles were flying around and it looked alright. But when you see the big, huge dinosaurs, it looks like something that I could probably do on my PC if I had about a month. I think the expense over there is probably just going to location shooting, but that's my theory. Same with Once Upon a Time, which looks a little bit better in the CG department. But I'm really going to be interested to see where the two shows end up. I think Once Upon a Time will probably be here for a while, and it's going to kill himself. It's going to kill itself on the one season, one premise, and then we'll figure something out later. That's my prediction. As for Terra Nova, I think it's probably going to get canceled. I'll be relatively pleased if I'm wrong, because I think it's an entertaining enough show to where I will tune in at least for a little while longer. And if it does get canceled, they'll probably pitch it to somewhere else. They'll probably try and get it picked up on Sci-Fi, which is losing, it'll be losing Eureka pretty soon. And I think that it'll fit in well over there, I think. So those are my thoughts. Let me know what you guys think, if you guys are even watching. I know a lot of people aren't watching Terra Nova, but if you've seen either show, just write in and let me know what you think.